Joining me now, former Europe, Africa, and Middle East editor for the Associated Press, Dan Perry, to continue this conversation. Dan, welcome as always. How optimistic do folks sound around a possible deal with the current details on the table?
It goes back and forth between cautious optimism and the more default option of a lot of skepticism. I think the reality, despite what politicians say, is that Hamas, for the past 4 or 5 months, has not really budged from their position that the deal they want is the return of all the hostages in exchange for an Israeli pullout from Gaza and a complete permanent end to the war, which they would spin, despite the destruction in Gaza, as a victory narrative for them, and which would have a dangerous aspect not just for Israel, but for the world, because jihadis would be emboldened and encouraged. I have yet to see Hamas move away from that in favor of the deal that the Israelis right now, as well as the Americans, the Egyptians, and Qataris are pushing, which is some version of a temporary ceasefire in exchange for a partial hostage release. We will see. What has changed is that Israel is now making noises that sound like an ultimatum. And that suggests that if indeed Hamas says no when they invade Rafah, they will be doing so either with U.S. collusion or with the U.S. In a situation where they're basically acting against the wishes of the Biden administration. That would be a dramatic thing. It looks like for the moment, Israel and Blinken/Biden are in fact aligned, and the pressure is on Hamas.
Well, we shall see. Meantime, the hostages, do we know how many may still be alive?
You know, there's a lot of psychological terrorism happening here, and I would hate to be part of it. So all I can say is Israeli intel suggests that a considerable proportion of them may already be dead. There are various estimates. Some are more dire than others. Clearly, not all are alive. That is clear. And when public opinion in Israel moves, as it has been doing in the past month or two, in favor of prioritizing the hostages and maybe ending the war with Hamas, which plays into the hands of the Hamas desire to have that kind of a deal, that is because there is an understanding after over 6 months that the hostages really are in danger today. Whereas, as regards fighting Hamas, you can stop for a while and resume it tomorrow. By the way, resume it tomorrow, meaning in a few months or a year, whatever, at the inevitable Hamas future violation of any ceasefire. I mean, it's sort of a fantastical scenario that Hamas will actually never again fire rockets or try to commit incursions or so on. That is basically in their DNA.
Yeah, point well taken. The two-state solution that you heard our correspondent just mention, what is most likely in terms of an option for Gaza's future in all this?
What could happen, in theory, is Israel agreeing to re-enter a process towards a two-state solution of the kind that it's done many times in the past, with the understanding that that can take a long time because the devil's in the details in this case. I think there is, a consensus in the region and in the West, and B, an understanding in most of Israel that a separation from the Palestinians is essential, desirable even to Israel, and fundamentally, in the long term, Israel needs it for its own survival because otherwise it'll be a binational half Arab state. That said, for Israelis to actually fully pull out of the West Bank militarily is a monumental risk, given the fresh memories of what happened in Gaza, which was a set of precedent for Israel pulling out of a territory for real, removing all the settlers and all the soldiers, having that territory be taken over by an ISIS-like jihadi group, and then being invaded and massacred from that territory. If that should happen from the West Bank, which is much closer to Tel Aviv and surrounds Jerusalem on three sides, the result would be tenfold, if not worse. So I think to really engage in a two-state solution narrative, a negotiation that is real, the world is going to have to really step in and make clear to the Palestinians and to any Arab interlocutor that the security issue for Israel is not paranoia, it's not an excuse, but something that really needs to be seriously addressed. And whether that's done through phased withdrawal, where Israel remains in effect occupying the nominally independent Palestinian state, or do we do it through foreign troops? Would the U.S. want to have troops on the ground keeping the peace? These are all open questions, but they can't be ignored.